The 1970s is known as the golden age of rock, but sometimes all that hype and expectation crashed harder than a Led Zeppelin into the ground. These weren't just ordinary misses. These were albums that had everything going for them. The Stooges, Funhouse, 1970. After Raw Power showed everyone what punk could be, before punk even had a name, anticipation for the Stooges' follow-up was electric. Elektra Records was betting big on Iggy Pop and Company, becoming the next underground sensation that actually sold records. I know, but Funhouse was too raw, too ahead of its time. The album peaked at number 106, and record stores couldn't give it away. Radio wouldn't touch tracks like Down on the Street. It was too abrasive, too unhinged. Critics called it noise, fans called it unlistenable. The thing is, they were right and wrong at the same time. Funhouse was brilliant, but 1970. America wasn't ready for that level of sonic brutality. Elektra dropped them faster than a hot guitar amp, leaving the Stooges to basically disband until punk caught up to them years later. Black Sabbath, Never Say Die, 1978. Coming off the monster success of Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, fans were expecting another heavy metal masterpiece. The band was touring arenas, Ozzy was becoming a household name, and Warner Brothers was pushing hard for another breakthrough album. Instead, what we got was Never Say Die, an album that peaked at number 12 in the UK but felt like creative bankruptcy. Ozzy was barely present during recording, battling personal demons and substance issues. Tony Iommi was left to carry the songwriting load, but the magic just wasn't there. The title track tried to recapture that Dark Sabbath magic, but it came off as forced. Hard Road and Shockwave sounded more like tired heavy rock than the genre-defining metal Sabbath was known for. Even die-hard fans could tell the band was running on empty. It would be Ozzy's last album with Sabbath until their reunion decades later, and you can hear why. New York Dolls, Too Much Too Soon, 1974. The Dolls' debut had been a critical darling, despite rocketing all the way to number 116 in Billboard. But Mercury Records was convinced they had the next big thing. These glam rock pioneers from Queens were going to break through with proper production and radio-friendly arrangements. Shadow Morton, the legendary producer behind girl group classics, was brought in to tame the Dolls' wild sound. The result? An album that satisfied no one. Too Much Too Soon stripped away the raw energy that made the Dolls special, while failing to add the commercial polish that might have gotten them radio play. David Johansen later admitted, "We lost our edge trying to become palatable." The album stalled commercially and critically. By 1975, the band was essentially finished, victims of trying to be something they weren't. The punk movement they helped inspire would happen without them. Alice Cooper, Muscle of Love, 1973. After Billion Dollar Babies hit number 1 and made Alice Cooper a household name, everyone expected the next album to be another theatrical masterpiece. Warner Brothers was throwing money at promotion. The stage shows were getting bigger, and Alice was everywhere. TV, magazines, you name it. But Muscle of Love peaked at number 10 on the US Billboard 200 and number 34 in the UK. Decent numbers, but a noticeable drop from the platinum glow of its predecessor. The band had ditched longtime producer Bob Ezrin, and it showed. Core guitarist Glenn Buxton wasn't even on the final recordings. The album felt scattered, jumping between hard rock, Broadway theatrics, and even proto-disco elements. Critics were mixed at best. For a band fresh off international superstardom, this kind of felt like a real stumble. It was essentially the last gasp before the original Alice Cooper group broke up. Sgt. Pepper movie soundtrack, various artists, 1978. Talk about hype. A star-studded Beatles tribute featuring the Bee Gees, Peter Frampton, Aerosmith, and more, tied to a big-budget Hollywood musical. RSO Records was betting this would be the soundtrack of the summer, maybe even the year. Instead, The Sergeant. Pepper's movie soundtrack was the first album in history to achieve return platinum status, as stores took over 4 million copies of it off their shelves to ship back to their distributors. RSO Records destroyed hundreds of thousands of copies, crippling the company with a large financial loss. The movie was a disaster, but even worse, the album turned beloved Beatles songs into disco nightmares. The Bee Gees' version of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band was painful. Frampton's The Long and Winding Road was equally cringeworthy. The album was named the worst ever on Maxim's April 2000 list of pop albums from the 1970s to 1990s. It was a commercial and artistic catastrophe that nearly bankrupted RSO Records. Sometimes even the biggest names can't save a fundamentally bad idea. Lou Reed, Metal Machine Music, 1975. Coming off the success of Walk on the Wild Side and Sally Can't Dance, RCA was ready to make Lou Reed a mainstream rock star. They had big promotional plans, expensive marketing campaigns, and genuine belief that Reed's next album would be his commercial breakthrough. What they got instead was 64 minutes of pure guitar feedback. No vocals, no melodies, no songs. Just 4 sides of screeching, overdriven noise that sounded like industrial machinery having a nervous breakdown. The album reportedly sold just 100,000 copies out of sheer curiosity, before a tidal wave of returns made it one of the most refunded albums in RCA's history. They pulled it from shelves within weeks. Rolling Stone called it utter garbage. Reed later admitted he was partially trying to get out of his contract, saying, "I was serious, but I was also kidding." Kiss. Music from the Elder, 1981. After a string of platinum albums and sold-out arena tours, Kiss decided to get ambitious. They wanted to create a rock opera, something that would show their artistic depth beyond the makeup and pyrotechnics. Casablanca Records was fully behind it, expecting another massive hit. The Elder was pretentious, overproduced, and completely alien to everything Kiss fans loved about the band. Instead of rock and roll all night, you got pseudo-medieval concept pieces about mystical warriors. It peaked at number 75 in the U.S., their worst chart performance in years. Gene Simmons later called it our punk album. It alienated everyone. Paul Stanley admitted, "We forgot who we were." The tour was canceled, the concept abandoned, and Kiss went back to basics faster than you could say, "I was made for loving you."
I was made for loving you.
Fleetwood Mac, Tusk, 1979. After Rumors dominated the charts for 31 weeks and sold over 20 million copies, anything Fleetwood Mac released next was guaranteed to be an event, costing a cool $1 million to record, making it the most expensive rock production to date. Fleetwood Mac's double vinyl successor to the hugely successful Rumors was, as creative spearhead Lindsey Buckingham told Rolling Stone, clearly an undermining of what was expected of us. Where Rumors was packed with immediately affecting tracks polished to a high studio luster, Tusk experimented with a sleazier lo-fi sound and ad hoc production twist. And where Rumors topped the Billboard 200 for 31 weeks to sell more than 20 million copies, Tusk peaked at number 4 before eventually selling some 4 million albums. 4 million copies sounds successful, but compared to Rumors' monster sales, it felt like a massive disappointment. The title track featuring USC's marching band confused radio programmers. Fans expecting more heartbreak anthems got experimental tape loops instead. Warner Brothers had spent a fortune promoting what they thought would be the album of the decade and got a cult curiosity instead. The Who, Who Are You, 1978. By 1978, The Who were elder statesmen of rock, and expectations were sky high for their next album. MCA Records was promoting it as their triumphant return to form after the ambitious but commercial disappointment of The Who Sell Out. But Who Are You captured a band in decline. Keith Moon's drumming was erratic. Due to his deteriorating health, Pete Townshend was creatively burned out, and the whole project felt like they were going through the motions. The title track became a classic, but the rest of the album sounded tired. The album peaked at number 2 in the U.S., but it lacked the raw energy of Live at Leeds or the ambition of Tommy. Worse, Keith Moon died just weeks after release, making the album cover, showing Moon slumped in a chair marked not to be taken away, tragically prophetic. Pete later said, "We were hanging on by our fingernails." Ringo Starr, Ringo IV, 1977. After his early solo success with It Don't Come Easy and Photograph, Atlantic Records was convinced Ringo could be a major solo star. They invested heavily in Ringo IV, hiring top session musicians and producers to craft his bid for disco stardom. Picture this: Ringo in gold chains, open shirt, and curly chest hair, trying to out-falsetto the Bee Gees. The album was a complete genre pivot that sounded nothing like Ringo at all. No songs were actually written by Ringo himself, and his usually charming personality felt stiff and forced under all that gloss. Rolling Stone called it a staggeringly poor record. It barely cracked the U.S. charts and completely flopped in the U.K. Even longtime fans who had stuck with him through his solo career were left puzzled. Ringo later joked, "We tried to go in a different direction. Unfortunately, it was the wrong one." Yes, Tormato, 1978. Coming off the massive success of Going for the One, Yes was at their commercial peak. Atlantic Records was expecting another prog rock masterpiece that would cement their status as arena headliners. But Tormato was a mess from the start. Rick Wakeman had left the band again, replaced by Patrick Moraz, and the chemistry was off. The recording sessions were chaotic, with band members barely speaking to each other. The album title itself was a typo. It was supposed to be Tomato, but they stuck with it instead. The songs meandered without the tight arrangements Yes was known for. Release, and Arriving UFO sounded more like half-finished jams than fully realized compositions. It peaked at number 10 in the U.S., but dropped off the charts quickly. Critics savaged it, and even Yes fans struggled to defend it. Jefferson Airplane, Bark, 1971. After the psychedelic success of Surrealistic Pillow and the political fire of Volunteers, RCA was expecting Jefferson Airplane to continue leading the counterculture revolution. The promotional budget was huge, the tour was mapped out, and everyone expected another generation-defining statement. Instead, Bark was unfocused and uninspired. Grace Slick's vocals were buried in muddy production, and the songwriting lacked the edge that made their earlier work so compelling. It peaked at number 11, but felt like a creative dead end. The band was fracturing internally, with members pursuing side projects and personal interests. Paul Kantner was more interested in science fiction concepts than rock and roll. The magic that made them spokesmen for the hippie generation was gone, replaced by a tired professionalism that satisfied no one. Deep Purple, Come Taste the Band, 1975. After Machine Head made Deep Purple one of the biggest hard rock bands in the world, Purple Records was expecting another heavy metal classic. The hype was building for what they promoted as the bands returned to their heavy roots after some experimental detours. But Come Taste the Band captured a band in transition. Ritchie Blackmore had left, replaced by Tommy Bolin, and the chemistry was completely different. The album peaked at number 43 in the U.S., their worst showing in years. Bolin was a talented guitarist, but he brought a funkier, more American approach that clashed with Deep Purple's British metal sound. John Lord's keyboards felt out of place, and Ian Gillan's vocals couldn't carry songs that weren't written for his style. It was the end of an era, and everyone could tell. Grand Funk Railroad, good singing, good playing, 1976. After years of arena success and gold albums, Capitol Records brought in Frank Zappa to produce Grand Funk's next album, expecting the collaboration would create something revolutionary. The promotion was massive. Frank Zappa produces Grand Funk was plastered everywhere. The result was an uncomfortable compromise that pleased neither Zappa fans nor Grand Funk's blue-collar rock audience. Zappa's experimental tendencies clashed with the band's straightforward approach, creating an album that sounded confused and directionless. It peaked at number 52, their lowest chart position in years. Radio wouldn't play it, and fans at concerts demanded the old songs. Mark Farner later admitted, "We let someone else change who we were, and it didn't work." Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Works Volume 1, 1977. After years of progressive rock success, ELP decided to go completely over the top with Works Volume 1. It was a four-side extravaganza, with each member getting a solo side, plus a fourth side bringing them together. Atlantic Records hired orchestras, built custom studio setups, and basically threw unlimited money at what they thought would be the prog album to end all prog albums. The tour that followed was one of the most expensive rock productions of the decade. Full orchestras, elaborate stage setups, the works. But critics slammed it as self-indulgent, and fans felt like they were paying premium prices to watch ego trips they hadn't asked for. It sold moderately, but nowhere near expectations for a band used to filling stadiums. That tour nearly bankrupted the group. They were literally running out of cash midway through. As one critic put it, this is what happens when ambition outpaces common sense. Here's the thing about these albums. They weren't made by talentless hacks. These were established artists at the height of their fame, backed by major labels with serious money. But sometimes the pressure to top yourself, to chase trends, or to prove you're more than just a rock band leads to spectacular failure. The 70s were wild, and not every swing connected. Some of these albums have found their audiences over time. Others remain cautionary tales about what happens when hype outpaces reality. But that's what made the decade so fascinating. When everyone was trying to push boundaries, some were bound to push too far. So what do you think? Did any of these surprise you? Do you actually love some of these supposed failures? Get down in the comments and tell me. Because sometimes the most interesting stories are about the albums that dared to fail spectacularly. And hey, if you survived Lou Reed's Metal Machine music all the way through, you're tougher than most of us. Hit that thumbs up if you enjoyed this trip through rock's most ambitious disasters, and make sure you're subscribed, because we're just getting started with the stories the music industry doesn't want you to remember. Until next time, keep spinning those records, even the weird ones.